Hello everybody, Raspberry Barrel here, and we're back at it again to read some more Biographies of Mewni. Today we'll be continuing the biography of Mo, the original Monarch, by Mewni Historian on Deviant. Please go check out their Deviant page to see the rest of their work. And I know we're eager to figure out what happens to Mo next, so let's get right into it. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and let's get into this biography. In the summer of 1030 BS, her soldiers were really holding the front from Seth's new monster army and leading attacks into his territory. So she took a quick break to Arcadia. She hadn't been there since the war started almost 10 years prior and couldn't believe how much changed, how much better it was. While roughly half of the human population was fighting, the remainders were spread all through the other civilian cities and villages, so Arcadia was the least crowded it had ever been. While her old tower was kept in great conditions, it was like a whole new tower to her. When the leaves started to turn, Mo was more confident than she had ever been. Seeing the beauty of Arcadia really inspired her to keep fighting for the future of humans, and thus she inspired many of her warriors. They all pretty much radiated with confidence. The non-fighters would say the shine on the warriors was from their spirit rather than the sunlight. They became a force that many monsters would tremble when they saw them coming. But Seth still had an iron grip on his monsters, forcing them to fight the humans. Seth had his fellow Septarians as generals to keep the other monsters from deserting, killing those who did. While Mo loathed them, she also pitied the monster soldiers as they were forced to fight, while those in her army chose to fight and could leave at any time. Seth forced them to fight out of fear, while Mo inspired her soldiers to keep fighting. It's what made the real difference in the battles. It's how the few thousand soldiers were able to withstand the years and years of attacks from monsters. During mid-fall, Seth personally led the charge to retake the valley, and they unfortunately managed to break through the front that had control of the valley once again. But Mo herself went there herself and defeated his remaining forces single-handedly. Mo and Seth had a one-on-one fight, and during it, Mo lost her wand, and Seth thought it meant he would easily be able to beat her, as she always used magic. But Mo was prepared for a situation without magic, sparring with her friends, and got her wand back and sent him flying out of the valley, reclaiming it. Seth was not happy with Mo's victory and made a personal vendetta with her, which ultimately led to his downfall. Him wanting to see her dead over anything else led to him diverting forces to where she was, which she used to her advantage. She wouldn't ask this of anyone else, but she used herself as bait to draw the majority of his forces away so hers could sneak by and attack his strongholds. By the time Seth realized her strategy, winter had come and the humans had even gained territory in the cold region. With the coming of winter, Mo had a good feeling that the coming year would bring her people total victory. The snow brought back her earliest memories from when she crossed over to Mewni, the earliest she could remember anything. That stump day, all the humans celebrated bigger than ever before, while still on alert in case of another ambush. Mo even composed a speech, talking about how it didn't matter where they came from, that Mewni was their future, and they were going to take it. That winter, many battles were fought, but the greatest happened in a single day, one that changed the fate of Mewni. In the late winter, almost spring, of 1029 BS, the eve of what would be known as Gravnock 36, Mo and her friends were discussing the coming battle. Seth's forces gathered at Helland between two forests, and Mo and her friends would lead their army. Most of them were in the area to victory. Both sides prepared for the final battle they knew was coming, most of their forces present. As dawn raised on Gravnock 37th, the human army charged into battle, with Mo in her butterfly form and friends charging in on unicorns. Even Healer Pearl carried an axe and beheaded a few enemies. Numbers were dropping on both sides, but the humans were winning. But Seth found Mo and attacked her from behind, dragging her to the ground. and would have succeeded in stabbing her in the back if Mo didn't open a portal. Seth was so shocked and didn't see the portal behind him, and she blasted him in the back. She continued to blast him until he ordered his soldiers to retreat. And then Mo won, for now. By the sun's set, the monsters had retreated deep into the forest, now known as the Forest of Certain Death. A week later, Mo gathered all Mewmans in the shore where they originally came from 20 years before and declared them freed from monster tyranny, thanking all the soldiers for their selfless bravery and dedication to those who fought to make this Mewndependence possible. Mo preparing for the battle. After Mewndependence, Mo returned to Thamor to rule from there, as she had spent many meaningful years there and it had become the capital of Mewni, ironic since it was the largest monster city in the old days. Adjusting to normal life wasn't easy. Well, normal as it was for Mo, finding it very hard to rule over the Mewmans, as they were spread out all over the known world, and to help manage them she appointed land areas to her friends to enforce her rule, but also gave them the freedom to adjust or change things as they saw fit. Pearl would rule over the river areas between Fort Solaria and Chris. Rush had the valley region, Willow took Colonia, John would take the areas that were being set up in the colder region, Kai would take the lands that bordered the forest where the monsters retreated, acting as a guard, Horns would take the lands around Fort Devlin, and Chris was the forest lands past Colonia, south of the Settlers River. Mo would rule the 3 original cities and their areas, but from Thamor. Even with this new system, ruling wasn't easy for Mo, as she was crazy bored. With today ruling as a full-time job, Mo only had less than 10,000 subjects at the time. During the war, her attention was focused on, well, war, but now peace was boring, until Glosric showed up again. He said that now she was done with her war, he had a special project for her, and Mo eagerly accepted. He took her to the settlers' shore, the sea still filled with magic, and there Mo would begin constructing the magic sanctuary. Mo used magic to find the hole where the well, the very spot the magic flows into the world, and she took rocks and carved them and built them into a spout. That way the magic would be contained and not just spilling into the ocean. It soon lost its magic glow and returned to normal water. Though Mo did use magic, she took her time building the sanctuary, even using hand tools for carving and even hand set stones, a project that took many, many weeks. Mo first set the foundation with rocks and dirt, with the well in the middle. She then hand-carved Glosric-shaped statues and waterfalls around the walls. Then she even transplanted vines from her tower back in Arcadia and put them in the sanctuary along with bushes and flowers to liven the place up. Even carved the beginning of her people in the entrance of the sanctuary, and even made the glass ceiling from sand. She finished by domesticating alligators to be gatekeepers. But when her work was done, Glosric took her inside to show her something. The water around the well was still magic-y, and from it flower pods rose up, Glosric saying they were the finished product, and from these pods the 5 members of the Magical High Commission emerged. They would be the enforcers of magical law throughout the universe and would combat both magical and non-magical threats. And although Mo had a seat on the commission, her priority was always to her people. From 1028 to 1021, Mo's life was pretty simple. She would go to the bureaucracy of magic to deal with some magical issues, but as magic was pretty fresh, there wasn't much to deal with. The most notable universal disaster during this time was the time traveler Dr. Pinkerton Shantasar, a scientist from 65 million years into the future from another dimension who wanted to change the past in a horrible way. They needed Mo's magic to stop him, and stopped him they did, and Romulus crystallized him for eternity. On Mewni, life was quiet, as monster attacks were small and very rare. But a couple of years after Mewndependence, some girls started to sprout hearts on their body, and would, temporarily, become creatures similar to Mo's ultimate form, and would capture boys and cocoon them. but would return to normal in a few hours. This traumatized many people, including the girls who went through it, and the girls ended up with small wings after they turned back. This would be called mewberty, and Glosrick said the wings were girls forming a connection to magic, but due to when it happened, during the teen or transitional years, it mixed with the hormones and causes, well, we all know what happens. It was then Mo created the Mewberty Bunker Project, where every village would have an underground bunker, one every cushioned, and when the hearts first appeared on the girl's body, colors varied, she would be locked in there until it was over. There were even more in major towns and cities. Some might think it's cruel, but fact is many girls actually voluntarily go into that bunkers to avoid traumatizing their friends and family or worse. While a rare few guys got wings, they were older than the girls when puberty happened, so they didn't go through the same terrifying phase as girls. Mo during her board years. In the start of 1020, Mo could feel her chances of having a baby slipping away. Most women stopped having babies about 10 or 50 years older than her, but a few, including her, were different. So Mo disguised herself and would have meaningless relations with guys in effort to get pregnant. She did this once or twice a week throughout the year, disappointed when her inking came around as it meant she wasn't pregnant. And while inkings are usually 28 days apart, Mo's became more distant, and it really stressed her out as her chances of having kids were lowering. But that changed mid-fall when she vomited all over a tower servant when he woke her up and brought her breakfast. She was 11 days late, but since she felt fine later, she was sure it meant she was pregnant. But there wasn't a stick that could tell her if you're likely pregnant or not by going to the bathroom on it. A few consistent days of morning vomiting later all but convinced Mo she was pregnant. When the cravings came, it was a nightmare as she craved very salty foods, which she hated but couldn't resist. And then there was her emotional outburst, particularly prone to anger, which is not good for a magical queen. But seeing the happiness kids brought her friends made it worth it for her, especially when other things grew besides her belly. In 1019 BS, the morning on the day that would be Thurk 76, Mo's water didn't just break, it flooded. She went through several hours of pain and broke several hands. Before dawn on Thurk 78th, Mo finally began to push her baby out, and during the final pushes, her marks glowed and light beams shot from her eyes and mouth, and she screamed so loud it shattered the windows, and she passed out when the baby finally popped out. Mo gave birth to a healthy baby girl with blue eyes like her, but had black hair, and the most striking feature was 2 green butterflies on her cheeks. She named her daughter Alexandra, after the man who saved her life 16 years ago. She asked Glosrick why her daughter had butterflies on her cheeks, and he explained it was because her mother, had such a strong connection to magic that it passed the connection on to the daughter. Mo was so excited to be a mother, she basically considered everything else unimportant. Her baby was basically attached to her breasts. Whether it was feeding or just holding, Alexandra was rarely seen away from the region. Should anyone try to reach for the baby, Mo would make a sound similar to a wild animal, and they would back away. At meals, she would use her hand to levitate her food and drink towards her mouth. She would even bathe with the baby. Learned how to make magic bubbles that her daughter just laughed hysterically at, which brought her so much joy. At 6 Selines old, Alexandra was always within arm's reach of Mo, even had the crib right next to her bed and slept on the side facing it. When her baby started showing signs of crawling, her anxiety levels went sky high. Her friends Rush and Chris knocked her out with poppies and took her to the middle of the forest outside of Colonia. It was to teach her letting go is okay, as Pearl and John were looking after Alexandra. But Mo was so mad she basically made a crater and flew like a mad fireball and burst through the walls of her tower, but Alexandra wasn't there. It wasn't until the next day did Pearl and John return with her baby, and nothing bad happened. Mo did learn that a little separation is good for both the mother and the child, but she threatened to destroy her friends if they ever did that again. When the time came, she threw her daughter a big first birthday party with her own special baby cake that she coated the walls with, while the adults and other kids split a big one. Seeing the cake all over her baby girl made Mo decide she wanted another child. Through the rest of 1018 BS and most of 1017 BS, Mo employed the same strategy she did to get Alexandra, though it was hard for her to leave her baby, especially when she learned how to walk. But Mo did want to give her a sister or brother, and close to around Alexandra's second birthday, Mo became pregnant again. She was overjoyed with both her pregnancy and her daughter speaking full sentences. Her daughter's first was, "I love you, Mama." Mo just cried a river of joy when her daughter said that, though this second pregnancy was just as bad as the first. This time she craved sweets and basically ate desserts for dinner, and while she wasn't as quick to anger as before, when she did it was way worse. An example was when she was about 7 Celine's pregnant and Romulus and Ronaldo made a joke about her sweet tooth and her belly. She blasted them so high they didn't hit the ground till next week. And unfortunately, she went into labor while on a trip to the woods. You can't portal while in labor. You might leave the baby in there. Mo teaching baby Alexandra. The day was Gravnock 48th, 1016 BS, and labor went a lot faster than before. Labor at midday and birth a couple of hours after dusk. Her second child was a boy with medium green eyes and blonde hair with red marks that resembled a firefly, and she named him Red after the color of his marks, a simple name. The next morning she returned to Thamor with her son in her arms, wrapped in the picnic basket. Mo wasn't as attached to Red as a baby as she was with Alexandra, giving him distance. Though it wasn't easy for her, she fought through the urges to take him everywhere, and he was always fine, and Mo was able to perform her queenly duties again. That included the commission seat as things started to heat up with it, and Alexandra was very caring towards her baby brother, which she was very thankful for, as her friend Pearl's 2 daughters didn't really get along. Though that year things got hairy as monsters tried to attack on the area under Kai's control, but because that area bordered the forest of certain death, they were ready for an attack. But it was a diversion for Seth to sneak by and travel to Thamor to try and assassinate Mo. But Mo was letting her kids play in the garden behind the tower and saw Seth raising his sword at Alexandra, who was holding Red. But from afar, Mo formed a bubble that bound his sword back into his face, and when she moved her babies out of the way, she went full Mama Platypus Bear on his tail. It would be many, many years before he was seen again. In the start of 1015 BS, Mo insisted her kids had constant guards, even when she was around, and no one argued with her about it. She would even bring her kids to commission meetings, which the other members weren't happy about, as Alexandra needed constant trips to the bathroom, and Red was twice as hungry as Alexandra, and even cried more often. Once Romulus threatened to crystallize Red if he didn't stop crying, and Mo responded by beating him all the way to the basement, with Red and Alexandra laughing the whole time, and would have done worse if Hecate didn't portal Romulus into another dimension. Mo received an intervention from her friends concerning her recent influx of parenting protection. She wanted to protect her kids from the dangers of the world, but she needed to let them grow, and she also had responsibilities to every other Mewman. It was then Mo began to think about the future of Mewni. Eventually, she would have to pass on the throne, and it would be harder for future rulers to balance family and royal responsibilities. This thinking would lead to a decision she would make when she did pass on the throne. She eventually decided to give her kids their space again and lessen the guards. Mo knew being a leader was tough and sometimes required difficult choices to be made, and sometimes required personal sacrifices. Towards the end of fall, she saw how happy her kids playing in the royal gardens without the guards was, and this just filled her with happiness, feeling like her family was perfect and wouldn't want anything to change. On the morning of Torex 12th in 1014 BS, the day after Stump Day, Mo woke up with a horrible headache after having too much fun after drinking Rush's special white holiday potion, and did remember having private fun with a guy she couldn't remember. It had to be a tower staff member, as they were the only guys there that night. A party she threw for the tower staff. A couple weeks later, she was having morning vomiting, meaning she was pregnant with her third child. When she announced it, some people whispered. Instead of craving something sweet or salty, she craved something so weird it shall not be written down. And instead of angered swings, she had sobbing swings, crying over little things. During the later Celenes of her pregnancy, she would have trouble keeping up with her kids, as one was 2 and the other was 5. Luckily, they entertained each other quite well. On Dartark 47th, she went into labor, though luckily she wouldn't have to birth in the woods this time, like the last one. During the sunrise, or it would be if it wasn't storming, of the next day, Mo's eyes and mouth once again shot beams of light, like with the last 2 births when the babies actually popped out. It was another son, one with purple bluish eyes, dirty blonde hair, and purple dragonfly cheek marks. She named her son Zim, which is the first settler's word for storm, as the one brewing the early morning he was born was a particularly nasty one. Mo passed out that afternoon with her newborn son in her arms, and her other 2 kids in bed with her, happy to have another addition to their family. Mo and her family after Zim's birth. And that was part 2 of the biography of Mo, the original monarch, by Mewni Historian on DeviantArt. I hope you all enjoyed this biography. Thank you so much, Mewni Historian, for allowing us to read this, and please, everyone, go check out his DeviantArt page. Hope you're all having a good holiday season, and see you all next time. Have a great rest of your day.